Now, somebody had raised this question of how is it possible to love death? It's a very interesting question. Everybody loves life. Who wants to love death? Nobody wants to love death. Everybody is afraid of death. Everybody hates death. But you will be surprised that as far as the great masters are concerned, as far as the scriptures are concerned, they tell us to look upon death as our best friend. Interesting, is it not? The scriptures say that Mrityum mitravat pashyet. Mrityum mitravat pashyet. It says, look upon death as your best friend. Why? Now you see, we are very much fond of life. But you know, the life, the way we are leading it, and the way we understand life, in this you will see that life is constantly cheating us. We are being cheated by life. We are being deceived by life. Life deceives and cheats us, whereas death is the one thing which enlightens us. Death is the greatest teacher that human beings can have. If you just look into the story of Kathopanishad, you all know the Kathopanishad, the beautiful Upanishad which was very dear to Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda was very fond of this Kathopanishad. And in this Kathopanishad, there is a beautiful story, a dialogue between Nachiketa and Yama, where Nachiketa goes to the house of death, Yama, and poses certain foundational questions to him. A beautiful dialogue ensues there. We all know that. So, there if you just see, Yamaraj is not something to be scared of. Generally, in our popular understanding, we all present death as something which is frightening, something which is terrifying. But actually speaking, Yamaraj, who is the Lord of death, he is actually speaking the greatest yogi. He is the spiritual teacher. He is an enlightened soul. He is the most noble soul. So it is from this great spiritual master, Yamaraj, that Nachiketa attains Brahma Vidya, the knowledge of that supreme reality. It's a beautiful chapter. So first of all, we should have this wrong notion about Yama and death clear. Death is the biggest and the greatest supreme teacher in human life. Why death is supreme teacher? I ask you this question. Life cheats us, but death enlightens us. How does death enlighten us? This is another very beautiful question. You just see, when we see death around us, everybody doesn't get enlightened. But few people whose consciousness are awakened, when they see death, we all have seen death in life. You know, we have seen our near and dear ones die. We have seen their dead bodies. For a sensitive soul, a soul whose consciousness is awakened, that scene of a dead body can rouse many vital and foundational questions in that person's mind. Death will enlighten a sensitive soul, spiritually sensitive soul. All don't get enlightened. That is why Sri Ramakrishna very beautifully says, who is a human being? I'm just raising this question. Who is a human being? Are we all human beings? Externally speaking, we all look like human beings. But Sri Ramakrishna says, who is a Manush? In Bangla, the word used is Manush. And it is a Sanskrit word, Manushya. Manushya is the word. In Bangla, it is Manush. So Sri Ramakrishna says, a person whose hush, in Bangla the word is hush. Hush means consciousness. A person in whom whose consciousness is awake, he is Manush. So a person in whom the spiritual consciousness is awakened, he is truly human being. You see, in animals, there is no awakening of spiritual consciousness. And in the human beings also, those human beings in whom the spiritual consciousness is not awakened, that person may appear to be a human being, but actually speaking, that person is not much different from animals. What actually defines a human being is this awakening of human consciousness. So anybody in whom this human consciousness is awakened, if that person sees death happening in front of his eyes, that person will become enlightened. Many foundational and moot questions will rise in that person's mind. This is inevitable. That is how death enlightens us. Death will push us towards that ultimate reality, whereas life will cheat us, life will keep us tied down to so-called unreal things of life. So that is why Nachiketa poses a beautiful question to Yama. He says to Yama there, in Sanskrit the verse is so beautiful. Nachiketa says, Yeyam prete vichikitsa manushye astiti chaike nayam astiti chaike. Yeyam prete vichikitsa manushye. It is, Nachiketa says, that when a person dies, Yeyam prete, when a person dies, when somebody is dead, some people say that he is gone forever. But some people say that no, he is not gone forever, something is left behind. I want to know the mystery of this death. This is Nachiketa's questions to the Lord of Death, Yamaraj. So you see how death can enlighten us. That is why for a sensitive, spiritually sensitive person, for a person whose spiritual consciousness is awake, for such a person, death is the biggest teacher. Death enlightens him, and enlightenment is the one thing which helps us to conquer the fear of death. So is not death something which we have to love? Swami Vivekananda says, what is sannyasa? It is beautiful, one of his writings, he says, what is sannyasa? You see, we are all sannyasis. Or what is the central idea of sannyasa? Sannyasa means love of death. Swamiji says beautifully, you love death. Why? Love death means what? Death is not merely physical. It is not merely the death of the human body. The real death which we have to love is the death of the ego itself. The complete extinction of the ego. When this small limited ego dies, then and then alone the spiritual enlightenment comes. That's why if we want spiritual enlightenment, the small ego, this asmita which I referred to before, this asmita, this false ego has to die. That's why it is in and through this death of this false ego, the supreme enlightenment comes. That's why love death. This is what Swamiji told that Duke, that you come with me and I will teach you how to love death, because in and through the love of death, now this doesn't mean that somebody is going to go and commit suicide. No, committing suicide is no solution. No. It means spiritual enlightenment. It means the death of the ego. This is what actually brings about that spiritual enlightenment. And this is how love is, death is something which we have to love. Whereas life is that something which constantly cheats us, constantly deceives us by the so-called beautiful things of life.